So we are going to discuss in this video about the industrial revolution with reference to urbanization, and these are the few things that we are going to discuss. These are the urbanization in pre-industrial times and the start of industrial revolution and how it gave a boost to urbanization, the industrial revolution and the urban geography, and how the economic growth affect the urbanization due to industrial revolution. So first of all, uh, we have to take a very quick look at the very beginning of the history of human. The very first human that evolved in East Africa, it was dated back to 100,000 years, and according to archaeologists, the beginning of history started when the humans start spreading out of Africa after the cognitive revolution. It was like 70,000 years before this now. Humans start settling in different parts of the world. They start migrating and start settlement in different part of the world in the duration of 45,000 years to 16,000 years back. And then we have the Neolithic revolution or agriculture revolution, where humans started the domestication of plants and animals. It was dated back like 12,000 years before. Um, the Neolithic revolution that occurred in the world, it was in the areas of the Egypt, the Lower Egypt, Egypt, Phoenicia, Syria, and Mesopotamia. So it formed a very crescent-like structure. That's why we call it the Fertile Crescent. Um, After the Neolithic revolution, the hunter and gatherers society, the people that used to hunt and gather, they abandoned the nomadic lifestyle and they start settling near the people who lived by the agriculture production areas. As agriculture yielded more food, they start settling in very densely amount. The Neolithic revolution, or in the result of Neolithic revolution, cities were emerged, and those cities, when they emerged, they had two causes for their emergence. The first one was the stock of excess production, as the hunting of the animals as in the hunting of the animals, there was too much risk, and it was the food was not enough for all the people. And so after the Neolithic revolution, they had the excess production of the agriculture and the crops. So they started stocking it, and the people around their areas, the agriculture area, they start settling near them. And the second element of that, second element in the emergence of these cities was a religious focus. And these are the few cities, ancient cities that were emerged after the Neolithic revolution. It included the Uruk of Mesopotamia, the Aleppo of Syria, the Jericho of Palestine, the Mohenjo-daro of Indus Valley, and the Xia dynasty of China. If we take a very quick look at the pre-industrial world, so we see that before the emergence of industrial revolution, the 15% of the population lived in the cities. But their conditions were very pathetic. They had very pathetic hygienic conditions. Their death rate was very high. They had poverty, they had plague. But in Europe, this pre-industrial period was not sustained for long. We have seen the increment of population in Europe. If we see the example of Germany, Germany had the population of 3 million 1300 years back. But after in just 400 years, Germany had the population of 15 million. Um, but the very bad thing about that cities was that the wealth in that cities were concentrated in very few hands. uh, in Europe, due to their class system of lord and serf, because they had the excess of production, and that excess of production is being authorized by few people that we used to call as lord, and the people that work for that lords are called as serf. So uh, so we can say that most of the people in Britain or in England, they used to live a very subsistent level with no savings. Then we have the start of industrial revolution, where it start with the piston engine. This industrial revolution, it started in different stages or phases. The very first industrial revolution that started in 1760 and ended in 1813 in Britain, where the family and community, they are being replaced by the state and market. When this industrial revolution diffused in Belgium, then Belgium became the first country that transformed the iron coal textile into the other forms, and it became the economic hub. So the people or the worker, they had better opportunity and they had employment, so they start settling around that economic hub. After the industrial revolution, the Britain, they experienced a very vast increase in population, so their lifestyle was totally changed. uh, it was the first time that they experienced a very rapid amount of population, a rapid amount of increment in population. So as a result, they became more educated and they became more urbanized. um, Due to this mass places of employment, the people that used to live in rural areas, they start migrating to urban areas of England. So the population in England was double increased. This boom in population, this led to the settlement. This led to the new settlement that increases the number of cities. Between 1830 to 1860, all over the world, there was a rapid increase in urbanization and there was a rapid increase in territorial expansion. The start of second industrial revolution that started in 1870 and ended in 1940, it was a hub of chemical, petroleum, electricity, and steel invention. um, and the second industrial revolution had resulted in the incredible increment of cities and their growth. Here we can observe the population of the world after the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The red line showing the population and the blue line showing the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Here we can observe that how this population is being increased in very vast amount, in very immense amount after the beginning of Industrial Revolution. And due to this population growth, um, due to this population growth, the urbanization of the cities also increased, because we know that there are few elements that contributed in the urbanization, and the most prominent is the population. Now we are going to discuss about the industrial revolution and the urban geography of the industrialized cities. Uh, in industrial cities, the population growth were very much exaggerated. Like in just 100 years, the population of Europe become doubled, from like 1700 to nearly 1850, because due to industrial revolution, there were the increase in medical facilities, which resulted in the decrease in death rates, diseases, and wars. Uh, but the industrial cities, the population become doubled, but it also challenged the urban growth. The civic facilities of that cities has been challenged. Cities were going very faster, but it resulted in the poor sanitation and building. There was very high crime rate, and there was also the dilation of diseases. But the main issue of that time period was the emergence of new class system. Like in the agriculture sector, we they had lord and serf system, but it was changed. It was converted into the upper, middle, and lower classes, where there was the exploitation of the working class. But the consistent thing about the cities, that they are always changing. With this industrial revolution, we can see a very vast change in urban areas of North America, Europe, Brazil, Chile, and China. In Britain, uh, as we know that agriculture sector has taken over the industrial sector, then due to these industries, it contributed a very largest part of GDP. This increase in the economic zone, it brought people from villages to industrial sector, and there was a population boom in cities that resulted in the social issue of the cities as well. In other words, we can say there was a large scale urbanization which led to complication in cities, and uh, involved this complication involved the civic facilities. The civic facilities, they fall short of the essential commodities, but the most important civic facility that was being hampered was the housing problem. But in spite of this, Britain developed new roads, and they developed new modes of transportation to export their goods and services to other areas. But the very first proper road was built in New York, in Long Island, in 1991. But the growth of this industrial revolution was highly dependent upon the availability of transport and finished good. To export their goods, they had to they had to transport it to other areas. So they paved the waterways, railways, and roads. This industrial revolution, they also took over the larger restaurant to take over the food production. This was another good thing, because it resulted in the decrease in food prices, and the approachability of food for the people was very convenient. There were few outcomes of the industrial revolution. That was the first of all, the suburbanization. What is actually the suburbanization? It is the increased movement of services and industries from the center of inner urban areas towards outwards or onto the edges of built up areas. Like when people, they start migrating towards the peripheries of the cities, we call it as the suburbanization. um, in other words, we can say it is a continuing outward expansion. And during 1800 to 1900, the European cities, they experienced a very vast movement of middle class society towards suburbs. Uh, it was also an indicator that the suburbanization had a consequence which is related to the central business district, or CBD. Um, we can also experience it with the example that US suburban population, it grew in 1950 to 2000 as 26.7% to 49.8%. Here in the diagram, we can see how the outward expansion is being occurring. Another outcome of this industrial revolution was the modern urbanization. Uh, what actually was the modern urbanization? That those areas which were highly urbanized, they had less population, but they had very high civic facilities. Like in Europe in 1900, about 1 million people lived in 13 cities, but in 1999, there was a population of 1 million in 362 cities. And there is an expectation of having 1 million population in 600 plus cities in Europe. Uh, we can also see the modern urbanization in different areas like Australia, Western Europe, North America, also in Southwest Asia, North Africa. They also had a very great variety of urbanization. But the Middle East areas, such as Arabian Peninsula, they are highly urbanized due to their oil industry. Uh, this modern urbanization, it started in developed countries from 1850 to 1950, but on the contrary, in developing countries, the urbanization started from 1950. Even today, the 40% of the population living in cities of developing countries. There are few problems that are associated with suburbanization that we can find in the cities of developing country. They are the housing problem, services problem, water supply problem, sanitation problem, and health problem. We can take the example of India. Like in India, there are majority of people that are living in rural areas, but still their rate of urbanization is very high. We can see the example of the modern urbanization in here due to the industrial revolution. Now, the last thing, that how the urbanization affected the economic growth. As we know that industrial development, they played a very important role in the economic growth of the countries such as Taiwan, Indonesia, China, and Korea, as We have seen the example of England, that after the industrialization, the industries contributed the largest part of the GDP. Same thing happened in different parts of the world where the industrialization was started. Uh, some countries they managed this division, but with equality. But the few countries they failed in this equality. This rapid economic growth is essential for the countries to achieve reduction in poverty. Um, and also another few other things. This is the main prominent thing that the countries have to achieve. um, it is directly related to the income inequality in poor countries. The causes of this tradition the causes of this tradition are the inequality, the unequal access of education, the high land concentration, and the poor condition of civic facilities. These are all related to the economic growth. And also the main question that arises, that how urbanization affect the economic growth. uh, we know that urbanization is a process where the economy moves from agrarian production to advanced goods and services. um, it is an important thing, or it is a factual thing, that we know that where there is an urbanization where there is a high rate of urbanization in the areas or in a country, there is increase in the economic development of that country. Thank you so much.